So there's a few things you need to have set up and in place in order to follow along with this video. So first thing you need, obviously, is a Twilio account. You're also going to need a Spoke developer account set up with a few users and a group. You need a phone number connected to a Studio flow. And then finally, you need to have the Spoke functions deployed into the same account. So first thing we'll do is I'll just give a quick run through of one function in particular, which is called getExtension. There's a few things here to point out. These functions are quick start helpers to basically get you up and running quickly with the Spoke Directory API. And the real key to it is, in this particular case, we're going to query the directory API for a given extension number, and we're going to return from this function some values about that particular extension. So in this case, what we've done is we are hitting the directory API with an extension. We're awaiting a response from the API, and then we're basically extracting some values from the JSON payload that our API returns. In this case, what we're going to do is we're going to return a few different interesting attributes. So the first one is the extension that we've passed through. The display name, so that is the name of the particular directory entry. So over here on the right in the Spoke soft phone, the values that you would expect to see would be Jenny Anderson, Mike Smith, and sales. Type, this will be one of user, team, or device. Status is going to be the user or group's availability status. Availability summary is the value you see here in the grey text in the Spoke phone application. And then TWIML redirect URL is the value you use in order to send the call. Why is this interesting? Well, what this allows you to do is inside Studio, you can now call this function, get these attributes back, and make complex routing decisions based on any of these attributes. You can, for example, use the display name to say their name back to the incoming caller, the customer. You can use the availability status to actually make routing decisions as to whether you even want to send the call across to Spoke. You can give the caller an update on the individual user or team's availability. And obviously the TWIML redirect URL is important for sending the call across to Spoke itself. So let's stitch all of this together. We're going to jump across to Studio. I've got an empty flow with just a simple gather at the start. And now I'm just going to actually add a few different widgets in so that we can build out this flow. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to run a function off the back of a user pressing keys during the gather phase of the call. We're going to select the Spoke API service. We'll just select the development environment, and the function we're going to call is getExtension. If you remember, the parameter we're interested in is called extension, and the value we want to use to pass across to the API are the digits that were gathered in the gather widget itself. Based on that function result, we're going to make some routing decisions. So we'll actually put a split in here, and that split's going to allow us to effectively change the flow based on the values that were returned from the API. So we'll test the output of the function return. In Studio, a JSON result set will be passed into a series of attributes in the .passed variable. And so in this case, the variable we're interested in is status. And what we're going to do is add a condition to say, well, if they are available, then we can do something. And if that doesn't match, then we'll do something different. So the first thing we'll actually do is say based on there being no match to the individual entry's availability. Okay, so we'll add that in there. And we'll say, sorry, it looks like one.function, one.pass.display name is .available. And we'll save that. Okay. Now we've got a basic flow, which is say something to the customer, go away and check that the extension they've entered is available. And if it's not available, we're going to send them back to the start menu. You can, of course, implement any logic you like. This is just a way to show you can split your routing decisions based on the result coming back from the Spoke Directory API. Now what we're going to do is deal with the matching case, in which case we do want to send the call across. So we're going to say if the value is equal to available, we're going to redirect the call. Now, if you recall, one of the attributes we return from our directory API is this value called TWIML redirect URL. And that's a convenience helper there that we include so that it's easy for you to transfer the call across without having to remember our URL structure. There are a couple of other things here that are important though. So in this case, what's going to happen is if we send this call across to the TWIML redirect URL and the call goes unanswered, then Spoke's normal business rules will apply. And in the case of a call being sent to a user who's not available, then we will redirect the call to our voicemail. The caller has an option to leave a voicemail with the user, and it will then appear in the application and be sent to the user's email as well. If it's a group, there's a lot more complicated rules you can set up, such as redirecting to other groups, overflowing to numbers, etc., etc. But in this case, what we actually want to do is we want to bring the call back into Studio so that we can follow on with some additional logic. So we're actually going to do add 2 additional attributes to the redirect URL. So it's going to be return to equals flow and return to ID equals this flow ID. And so what is going to happen now is that if the call goes unanswered in Spoke, then the call is actually going to come back to this particular flow, and we can carry on executing the functionality inside this flow. One of the great things about redirect is that it has support for this return state. And so what we're actually going to do is we're going to add another say in here, and we're going to follow exactly the same pattern that we followed before with the say and play when the user wasn't available. And we'll say, okay, sorry, name couldn't take your call. You've got a basic IVR flow that plays an announcement to the customer, collects some digits, looks up the Spoke API, makes some routing decisions based on whether the user's available, and then if the call goes unanswered, sends the caller back to the initial menu. Of course, there's a lot of other things you can do. You could choose to enqueue the call into Twilio Flex. You could attempt to send it to a different overflow group in Spoke. You could send it back to the same user without the return to URL, and then it would go through to the user's voicemail. So as you can see, you can build some quite complicated routing decisions. Over here in the Spoke application, I'm logged in as Jenny. So that's marked me as me in the directory here. So I'm actually going to change my availability to say that I'm actually busy for the rest of the day. So here we go, it says busy for the rest of the day. And you'll see it's also marked the sales group as busy because as Jenny, I'm the only member of the sales group. Okay. So what happens now? Well, when I call into the Studio flow.
Hello, and welcome to Acme Cars. Please enter an extension number and I'll connect you.
So again, we're going to enter extension 100.
Sorry, looks like Jenny Anderson is busy for the rest of the day.
And so there you go. You've got that full flow. We branched across where it says, sorry, looks like Jenny is busy for the rest of the day, and goes back to the initial gather. So let me make myself available again, and we'll dial the sales call group. So I'm available as Jenny. There is one person available in sales, so I'm going to call the same number again.
Hello, and welcome to Acme Cars. Please enter an extension number and I'll connect you.
I'll enter extension 1000. You see that the Spoke call context has changed to call to sales, but I'm going to decline this call.
Sorry, sales couldn't take your call.
And there you go. So we've shown you 3 call paths here. So one is the happy path where the extension is entered. We look up, we determine that the directory entry that matches that extension is available, and we've sent the call across to that extension. The second path was that the extension wasn't available, and so we've informed the caller or the customer of that, and we've sent them back to the start of the IVR menu. And then the third case is that we determined that the extension was available, but the call goes unanswered when sent across to Spoke. And in that case, we've been able to pull the call back to Twilio Studio, inform the user that the call wasn't able to be answered, and again, send them back to the start of the flow.